Hey, everybody, this is Mark Smith, the host of Empirical Energy Podcast, where we look at the intersection of energy, AI, and blockchain. So I'm here today with MaryBeth Clifford from Protect. Welcome, MaryBeth.
Mark, thanks.
MaryBeth and I have worked together. We've done webinars together. We've hired their company to help us, like with my EPA cheat sheet and other regulatory things. But we're here today to actually talk about the verification side of MMRV, or the certification. And MaryBeth, why don't you introduce yourself, talk about your background and how you got to this point in your career?
Sure. Yeah, it's MaryBeth Clifford. I'm with Protect as an environmental consultant. I've got 13 years of background in the oil and gas industry, more specifically, and started out on the regulatory side of things, really doing some deep dives into compliance with air regulations. And like Mark mentioned, I've done a lot of work with him as far as things like the cheat sheet with the Quad OB, Quad OC, greenhouse gas reporting, and things like that. And then more recently, the big thing that's become of importance to a lot of companies is carbon and sustainability. And so Protect does have a group that I'm part of where we do focus on some of those different carbon and sustainability programs and working through that process of gathering data, going through verifications, getting certifications, and just understanding those ever evolving and often newer programs. There have been a lot of programs that have come out just in the last couple of years, working to help understand those and navigate that process. And so that's been a lot of my focus over the last 9 months with Protect, and we have a great team in our carbon and sustainability.
Excellent. We're here to talk today about the pathway around ISCC. And so, just for the context, I'm going to bring up something here. So, in previous episodes, we've talked about this MMRV thing. So, monitoring, measuring, report, and trading. In fact, I recommend anybody watching this episode go back and watch, I think it's episode 2 with myself and Shane, and we're talking about the trading side of this. Okay. But today we're going to talk about the verification side. And so understand the context and the roadmap of you are here. We're talking about the verification side. So in particular, in the episode with Shane, we talked about a scenario, a use case where we had some RNG and we had some natural gas from Pure West, a producer in Wyoming. And we have Gunvor here as an energy trader who's trying to provide a net zero gas to a AI data center. So that's the scenario set up. And the reason this AI data center wants the net zero product is because of their sustainability goals. And as you may not know, but the Microsofts, the AWS, the Googles, all of them have said, hey, we have a net zero goal. In fact, Microsoft even has a goal that said they want to be net zero today. And they actually want to get back all of every piece of carbon they put in since the beginning of their inception. So even go negative at some point. What they've been doing in the past is buying carbon credits. So buy regular energy, buy a bunch of carbon credits, and offset those two things. Now there's an opportunity to do insets. Instead of buying trees in Africa to offset your emissions, why not have an actual energy that you can consume that is net zero? So we talked about that in the Shane episode, but now we're going to go behind the scenes and talk about how you pull this off from a certification pathway. So there's a bunch more logos on here now. And so, MaryBeth, if you could walk us through this, that would be great.
Yeah. I'll start at the top with, since we're blending RNG and we're blending natural gas together, we'll start with the RNG piece. And so with that piece, it's going to go through its own form of verification and certification under potentially a program like the ISCC Plus. And with that, it will evaluate the life cycle of that manufacturing from cradle to gate, usually is what we're looking at there. And that's where you're going to see your really low CI scores because of the displacement of methane in that production process. And then you have your empirical natural gas that currently, like with Clean Connect, goes through the ISO 14067 process with mass balance to demonstrate a low CI score. And so that's taking all of those inputs from the production process, the energy consumed, the emissions from the manufacturing of the natural gas, to give you that empirical score as opposed to the default ones that we're so used to working with. And so then you have a lower natural gas CI than your default, and then you've got your RNG, and being able to then take those two things, blend them together, and using a mass balance, determine what you need, what percentage of each you need to hit that net zero score. And then with that, having the ISO 14067, there are some other paths for your natural gas. As you can see here, there's a new one, the ISCC CFC beta, and that's in partnership with Canada and the CFR, and being able to get a certification there for yours is probably one of the best ones right now to work through. And then there's some other verifications that can be done to bring all of that together and then have that provable net zero score.
Yeah, because one of the things that was new to me getting into this when you get into RNG is having these negative carbon intensity scores like minus 100, minus 200, even minus 300. But it really opened up a whole new avenue because up till then, the default score for natural gas was 79. So if somebody said, I want zero, there was really no path for that. So they would end up selling them like a minus 100, which is way below what they wanted and way more expensive as well to do it. In fact, I remember when we first started talking to Governor, they said we could buy all of the RNG in the planet and we'd never fulfill the kind of orders that people want to do at scale, the kind of energy. So that to be able to do this blending thing and have a certification around it is a real game changer for the traders and then ultimately for the buyers and actually for the producers as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that we're also trying to do in this pathway, being that we're a software company and whatnot, is come up with ways to automate the whole process. Because one of the things that's required for both sides is mass balance. It's a key thing. I know a lot of people trying to figure out how to do emissions inventory, and this is not an emissions inventory. Emissions inventory is an annual process, Subpart W or OGMP2 is done annually and is turned in like how far after a year?
Yeah, like 3 months usually.
Yeah. You can't do that in trading, right? You can't be trading live production or because typically trades in the real world are done, let's say on a monthly basis. They're reconciled every month. And so you can't say, oh, okay, I'll wait literally 15 months later and say, oops, I verified all this and it's too bad for you. The whole trades didn't meet the standards. So this has to be done in very quickly and reconciled, let's say a typical monthly type process. So the idea of rinse repeating these measurements and verifications is pretty key to the whole process. And I know you're still learning the Clean Connect way and digging in, but you've got to see a lot of different systems out there to do this. And yeah, so anyway, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about where this is going in the pathway side.
I would say the pathways are definitely really evolving right now. Carbon intensity is very much a hot topic, especially in the voluntary markets. Europe, like the EDF EU, has really decided to double down and continue to push forward with their carbon programs. Regardless of regulation requirements, I feel like the pathways of these different CI certification programs is definitely going to just continue to grow and expand. And so being able to understand your data and have the means of, in essence, managing it in real time, because like you said, the traders don't want to wait 15 months to know. And then you've got to deal with paybacks and credits and all of those issues if things don't match up at the end of the time period. One of the things that we have seen be highly successful with some of these different programs, especially on the renewable side, is doing it on a monthly basis. And with your Clean Connect system, you have that data that you're collecting in real time and gathering. And so most of that data, I would say, is already centralized and available for that process. And so then you would be able to, on that regular monthly basis or so, pull those couple of extra pieces together get that rolling score or no. I know that you're also creating those certificates through your platform, your Prove Zero platform,
Yeah.
which is fantastic because then it's verifiable and it's indisputable and they have that readily available. But with those certification programs, while you need to be able to have those sustainability declarations that go with a set of product that you are selling, you are also looking at annual certifications. And it just helps to be constantly building out that annual data set on a month by month basis so that you're creating that rolling average, putting that annual data set together, and then having that to submit for, in essence, your annual verification that yes, you have this process that's been certified, you have followed that process, and your data is verified, and the credits that you have utilized match with your data set.
And I think you're referring to what's now the industry seems to be coalescing around the EAC, the either environmental attribute certificate, or some people even call it the energy attribute certificate. But these EACs get generated and then they get accumulated here. And again, we do this on the blockchain so that they're all built up and again, immutable, transparent, traceable, and so on and so forth. So when they deliver these, that they can ensure that the trader who's acting as the fiduciary for this trade can say, hey, listen, I'm giving you something that's been verified. The verifiers have been verified, and these certificates are not double counted because that's one of the problems that, prior is EACs that have been done in a spreadsheet and they just hand a spreadsheet over to the buyer and the buyer's, okay, how does this spreadsheet prove that it hasn't been double counted or is not showing up somewhere else or somebody else is also claiming these certificates. Having on the blockchain where it can only be in one digital wallet at a time and it's traceable, I think is a good thing for this emissions trading accounting kind of thing.
Absolutely. And it really helps with the whole verification process because so many of these programs have requirements around declarations. And so those blockchain certificates, those EACs that you're creating, really will help with the documentation that's required around those declarations. And yeah, it's not in a spreadsheet, it's not editable, it's not manipulative. You can know with certainty that the data is concrete, which makes it a lot easier for the verifiers. At the end of the day, the verification process, you want it to be as quick and easy as possible. And that definitely plays into that.
And I think to just wrap this up a little bit would be to say, we've been really focused on this ISCC, and so far, so good. Depending on what the buyers want, right? In this case, a net zero gas for an AI data center, but it could be, let's say, a 30 CI score for an industrial producer is going to take that energy and produce something else like bioplastics or biomethanol, or the upcoming even maritime kind of fuel in the IMO. There's still some things that need to be ironed out. And I know ISCC is working with all of those different other pathways to make sure that the ISCC stuff is compatible. Our goal, of course, is to say, hey, I got this raw energy. It's been empirically measured. What's the recipe that the end buyer needs to meet their goals, whether it's EU regulated deal or Asia Pacific regulated or just a voluntary program? Yeah, what are you seeing out there? Is it starting to coalesce? Is it getting more confusing?
Depends. So, like with IMO and the maritime, ISCC has demonstrated that they are committed to creating the best pathway possible. The challenge is that there's not always alignment between some of these different regulations and requirements. And I think similar to you, here we have this data. What's the recipe? ISCC has a very similar methodology of let's look at the whole. How do we put something together? What's the recipe that gets you across the finish line with this program and with this program? There is complexity, and it would be great if everyone globally could just all be on the same page and have the same approach, whether it be the same cradle to gate approach or well to gate, but sometimes they pick different segments of the life cycle to focus on, and they're only looking at emissions for that particular section, which makes it a little bit more complex. But with Clean Connect, you have all the data. And are we making muffins or are we making biscuits? Very similar ingredients, two totally different outcomes. What of that do I need to pull together to meet the requirements here? And you have the data. It's just knowing which pieces of that data are required for each program. I wish I could say it's getting simpler. I think in some regards it is. ISCC is working on making it simpler and creating those pathways and bringing really solid documentation together for certifications and for verifications. But I would say, generally speaking, like the global different regulations and things like with RED 2 and IMO and whatnot, those are still complex. And they've admitted themselves that they don't have clear guidance yet. They don't have clear documentation. They have a roadmap and they're working to get there. But as far as for the operator and the end user to know what that looks like, there's still a lot of ambiguity, unfortunately. And so this is great where you guys are coming alongside to help bring clarity to it, make sure that the data is there. It's great with ISCC that they're working to put together clear pathways and make sure that they work with the most possible programs.
Yeah, I think, look, first principles and chemical engineering say, hey, mass balance is the way you do it, and you can pick off these life cycle analysis. So when the chemical engineers and the certifiers get on the same page, it makes me feel better. When chemical engineers who actually design these facilities and actually move product through them are completely off from the certifiers, then that's a big red flag in my opinion. So getting on first principles chemical engineering is where our main focus is, fortunately, and mass balance has been the key. You and I have both been to these ISCC conferences, and they might as well be called the Mass Balance Conference. Like without that, you don't get to do anything. It's a pretty key engineering principle there.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Anyway, just so people get to know a little bit more about Protect, what are, if there's interested in figuring out a pathway for themselves, independent, is that something you guys do?
Absolutely, is something that we do. We have a number of different types of producers with who participate in multiple different low carbon programs, whether it's the LCFS, ISCC, definitely CARB. Yeah, CARB is the LCFS one. We definitely have a team who are able to either provide support as you're doing an application for pathway, or if you have a pathway that you need support with. We've walked a number of clients through verification processes. We don't do verification ourselves, but we've been through that with numerous clients to help them make sure that they have the data collected and then going with them to the meetings to answer the questions and get through that verification step. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Mary Beth. Appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking in future episodes as well as this journey continues.
Sounds good.